Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, October the 17th, 2025. And today we are talking pricing and packaging for restaurants, working in restaurants, and then working as a farmer. And it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. From chef to tef. That's what we're going to call it. All right, happy Friday, everyone. Cheers to all the growers out there still harvesting, planting, prepping beds, all the things. In fact, if you are down in the Southern Hemisphere, then you are probably doing all of those things, maybe all at once, while we get ready up here to cool down. Yesterday, I finished out the sweet potato harvest. That's done. Mark that off the list. Then I finally sowed those beds to rye and crimson clover for the winter. And now that I think about it, I meant to add a little vetch to that mix. I may have to do that today. But anyway, sweet potatoes are tough to sow after because the digging leaves a little furrow and the ground is a little uneven. And then you have all these weird, like residual vines that aren't entirely broken up to deal with. So what I normally do is I just broadcast over top of all that, and then I mow it in with the flail mower, which is set pretty low. It's not my favorite approach to sowing a cover crop, but it works. I usually just have to lay my rye down a little bit thicker, like lay a little bit more seed than I normally would, and maybe not forget my vetch. We'll see. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about prizes and how farmers are consistently overlooked when it comes to major prizes. At Glenn K. Mail 6957, wrote, quote, "A thought on awards and prizes. Whilst a monetary prize is nice, it soon gets spent. The honor, however, lives on. Maybe a no-till growers award would hold enough honor to be worth having without a prize, other than maybe a beanie. Just a thought," end quote. I like the idea of giving out awards, and maybe we can look into something like that. But one, even like a crappy no-till growers prize would probably require a paid team to look through nominations, do interviews, perhaps visit farms. Plus, two, I still think there should be a good prize included. So maybe a golden beanie. Actually, gold's really expensive right now. How about a silver one? We've talked about doing a conference in the past. Maybe we just instead do an awards show. Also that day, we talked about compost business startup, and I liked this from @Vincent Rink, who wrote, quote, "Been working on building out a decentralized composting network in my area. I find gardeners who want compost and have working relationships with good feedstocks in the area. I build and manage piles across my neighborhood and show people what a good backyard system can look like. Besides working around the red tape of a big facility, I avoid some of the ugliness of big compost operations. No dig on them, haha," end quote. Thanks. And in fact, this is another business model that came up at the Kentucky Composting Conference for budding composters. Basically, you set up a small operation on a bunch of different farms and work less from one central location to avoid all the difficult permitting laws and land costs and all that stuff. That goes along with what I talked about on Tuesday, but before we move on, at Farmer Cheryl asked a question I can answer really, really quickly. Quote, "Do you ever eat and sell leaves of sweet potatoes? The leaves are considered super grains in Asian, African, and Caribbean cultures. How would one go about selling the leaves in the U.S.? And quote, "Yes, we definitely eat them for sure. Selling the sweet potato greens is a little bit harder unless you have access directly to, those markets, like communities that have, a tradition with those greens. But we have given them in CSA shares many times. It's a great August green when the offerings are starting to get a little boring and repetitive, because August, you can only grow so many things here in Kentucky where it is boiling hot in August. Also, the greens are absolutely delicious. We just add sweet potato greens to hashes and pastas, or just have them as a super simple side. Chop them up, saute them with garlic, that sort of thing. Last on that day, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for all the belated birthday wishes. You all rock, and I would know because I am middle-aged. And we use that term a lot. On Tuesday, we talked about how wannabe composters could just start farms. And at Richard Raji 9041 wrote, quote, "Hey, Jesse, we did exactly what you suggested with the compost about 5 years ago. My wife and I started Sun and Soil Farm in 2021. We also started our compost service at the same time. We now have about 70 to 80 households that swap out 5-gallon buckets of food scraps for clean, empty buckets at the farmer's market where we sell our produce. They pay $20 to join, which covers the cost of the bucket, and $3 when they swap the bucket. It brings in about $3,000 per year, and we can make all of our compost for the farm, which also saves us about $1,000 a year in compost costs. It only takes about 1 hour per week to dump and clean about 20 to 30 buckets and flip the piles. It has worked great for us so far and has a huge help getting the farm started and creating great soil for our farm," end quote. Thanks. And I mean, there's a there for, creating composting operations that are farms or farms that are also composting operations. Just saying. That day, I also mentioned tipping fees, and at Pascal XUS wrote, quote, I don't think that an arborist is going to pay you to bring you wood chips, especially since they can just have plenty of places to dump for free. And quote, maybe, but that depends on the area. But if you go to your local dump and find a giant pile of wood chips there, those are not getting to the dump for free. Track down those wood chip dumping trucks that go there, offer to charge a few dollars less than the dump does, and you got yourself a customer. We also talked that day about a potential oil contamination issue where cars were parked. At Veritas Vincent 2251 added, quote, in my state, a seller of residential real estate must truthfully disclose certain issues, like is there a garbage dump anywhere on the property, in the deed transfer documents. Maybe Rachel can stipulate her own specific questions, with truthful answers being conditions of her offer. Perhaps her attorney can request a bond of some sort payable to Rachel if one or more answers are later found to be at variance with what she finds. Just some thoughts. Any real estate attorneys / soil nerds listening? End quote. And yeah, that's not a bad idea to keep in mind, no matter if you suspect an issue or not when buying a property. Having a dump on the property is not always obvious, but it is, I guess you could almost say it's always not great. On Wednesday, we talked about mid-size fridge options, and a few good ideas came in there. At Rachel Anderson, Z69 wrote, quote, fridges, hint, my friends used a small secondhand display cabinet from a supermarket to store their produce, end quote. Yes, we have a glass door fridge, and albeit a bit expensive, it was originally to buy. It works for storage or display, really. Does both of them really well. At Ian Says Free Palestine wrote, quote, CoolBot Pro equals $400 plus. 2 Wi-Fi Inkbirds equals $125. Skip the CoolBot and don't forget to over-insulate, end quote. So this 2 Inkbird thing is one of the alternative versions of a CoolBot that I had mentioned. And it seems like it would work, but my only issue with it is the longevity and or consistency of quality of this system. When you're dealing with 2 controllers, it doubles the troubleshooting as well. Like I said, I like the CoolBot because it's, at this point, like 10 years old and still cranking away. It's very few parts, and I can fix it myself and troubleshoot it with those people. I do use one of the Inkbirds, though, for heating the cooler as a thermostat in the winter. That works really well, so no harm in trying out this particular system. There are videos online for how to build this cheaper version of the CoolBot. So, yeah, or if you have experience with it, let us know. We also that day talked about the declining populations of birds, and I mentioned that humans were the stewards of the earth. At Seawall CW wrote, quote, we aren't in fact stewards of nature or the world. That's a huge fundamental ideological problem. Humans are a tiny blip of cancer in Earth's wonderfully diverse biological history. We are compost on 2 feet who think too highly of ourselves, end quote. So every organism really is a steward of the earth. It's just that humans have arguably the greatest individual impact. And at present, most of the impact is purely consumptive and destructive. It does not have to be that way, though. It could be, that we repair the planet through good ecological management, make it less vulnerable to catastrophe or climate shifts. Less vulnerable, not necessarily immune. Climate is going to do its thing. Ask, the younger Dryas. And we can replenish our species richness. Maybe it's time for a beaver segment next week. I feel like that's what we all need. Then on Thursday, we talked about if radishes meet the hype, and I was pleasantly surprised at how many people weighed in on that subject. At Colton CVX wrote, quote, I think radishes are way overblown on sales potential. Perhaps in a high value market with a little competition, I can consistently sell 5 to 6 bunches of radishes per week, large bunches, but people have to be selling at some insane markets to be moving 20 plus bunches per market. Week after week, how many radishes do these customers eat? Question mark, exclamation, question mark, end quote. Thanks. And so when we were selling at the farmer's market, we in early April through until like maybe mid-May, we could sell roughly like 100 small bunches every week. Then once everyone else had radishes, usually like at the beginning or mid-May, the numbers, dove to maybe like 20 or so. So at that point, we started to back off or just completely stop planting them. Then we would grow as much as we could as space allowed throughout the summer, like after June when that sort of market bounced back a little bit. I won't guarantee it'll be that way in every market, but that was in Lexington, Kentucky. We have a decent market, a couple thousand people per day. But, it's not the biggest market in the world. Several folks endorsed daikons, like at John Doe 5182, who wrote, quote, I don't like the European/American red radishes, but Asian radishes like daikon are wonderful and go into dishes like Asian soup, like dishes, and are very important for the flavor. I like growing daikon because it's something substantial, end quote. And I love daikons too. They're great in a kimchi or any sort of, sauerkraut or whatever, but they are a little slower to grow, more like 55 days to maturity than like that 30 days to maturity of those small red radishes. So those fall, more into the storage radish thing where I'm, planting them in late July or through August for a fall harvest. Not that you can't plant them earlier. They just are, a little bit slower and don't, sell as well for us. So we don't have as much incentive to give them space throughout the year. Anyway, great stuff as always this week, friends. Love the comments and the contributions. You all rock. See, I did it again. Anyway, don't forget to keep your 20-second farm video clips coming to Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com. Show us those winter gardens. Show us those, garden prep situations for new farms, those stored crop, whatever you want to show us. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, packing and pricing for restaurants, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. If any of these shows bring you $2 worth of value a month, $5, maybe $5 in total, you can show that support over there at Patreon. I will try to get to questions from everywhere questions come in, but as a bonus, I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Mira Rosenblatt, who writes, quote, "Can you discuss the logistics of selling to a local restaurant, such as how packaging and pricing would differ from selling at a farmer's market? Kale, for instance, would I still sell it in bunches? Cherry tomatoes per pint or pound? How do I know what a fair price is? Thank you." End quote. All right, great questions here. Thank you. Now, we've tackled restaurant sales a bit on the show, but not so much on the packaging side, really. And also, there is also just always more stuff to add. So, Patreon members, obviously, as I always say, never hesitate to ask questions out of fear of redundancy. The nuances to these topics are nearly endless. So, first, on the pricing side, this is a perennial challenge for farmers to know what to charge, especially with new accounts whom you may not have a great relationship with yet. When you have that relationship, you can say, here's the price of X. And if they scoff at it, you can be like, well, let's talk about it. But before that relationship is built with the buyer, sometimes you just won't hear anything back and you won't know if it was the price or the product that kept them from buying it. Anyway, price is generally it's just a math equation. You have to know how much you need to earn of X crop before you can sell it. What were your labor costs? What were your seed costs and fertility expenses? That is just like the bare minimum the crop needs to earn for you. Then to supplement that figure, search for organic wholesale pricing on that item online and see if your baseline price falls into that range. And indeed, even if you're not, certified organic, but are practicing organic principles, that is still the pricing range that you will want to, put for yourself in the local produce. So I usually just, Google organic, whatever, and that helps inform the pricing. Take organic cherry tomatoes, for instance. I'm seeing those anywhere from $3 to $5 per pound wholesale. For your production, can you hit somewhere in that range and make it work with your costs? Just do that for each crop you want to sell. That's one way. Another way, or something to add to that, is just to ask the chefs what they are paying for specific items. See if you can get them to forward you the latest fresh sheets from Cisco or Creative Gardens or US Foods or whoever they normally buy from. Tell them that will help you to see if you can compete. You can even mention it may save them some money in the long run. Now, you won't be able to compete on prices with Cisco, but you may be able to offer other things like better customer service, local produce, and the use of your farm name, longevity, etc., all the things. As I always say, bring samples and make them look really nice. That, of course, leads us to packaging. Bulk but not bulky is my general approach to restaurants. Restaurants often have very cramped coolers, so you don't want something they are not going to be able to easily fit into their coolers. I like 3-gallon bags for greens, which for lettuce holds about 5 pounds for us, plus degreened carrots, beets, radishes, and whatever crops make sense like that. Those work well in those 3-gallon bags. They're just nice for fitting into tight spaces for those smaller walk-in coolers. For things like cherry tomatoes, I like some sort of 2 to 3 quart vented clamshells that hold around, 3 pounds or so, depending on what size you go with. You do have to know which crops need ventilation, like squash, and which are better off without it, like greens. The 1 to 1.5 gallon bags usually do the trick nicely for most bulk herbs. Stemmed greens like kale, chard, collards, those are usually sold in bunches, but measured by weight. So maybe offer 1 pound or half pound bunches, but also, we put those in bags just so they don't dehydrate. At big restaurants, you are usually getting those in boxes that are lined with plastic bags, or for smaller orders, the bunches are in roughly 2-gallon bags that are tied off, just to, again, protect them from dehydration. You can find produce boxes and liners online. They are notably quite expensive, so maybe that's something you go in on with another farm to save on costs, especially as you're just starting out. And yes, generally, you are selling most crops by the pound rather than by the bunch for restaurants. For crops like carrots and beets, unless they request the greens on, which sometimes for beets they definitely do that, though for carrots most restaurants only want some greens if they want them at all, and so we usually just offer those separately, and most of the time they just want a little bit, so we just give them the carrot greens. Anyway, unless they request the greens for storage crops, the per pound price is given without the greens on. Each restaurant may have different preferences, so it's important to just check in with them at delivery and see if there's anything you can do better the next time, anything that maybe didn't work. It really is a nuanced thing selling to restaurants because not all of them really have the time or capacity to build a relationship with the vendors. Turnover can be extremely high too. So one may end up dealing with, multiple different people throughout the year. Not all restaurants have the same preference on communication methods either. So that can be a little complicated to keep up with. And not all prefer the produce to arrive on the same day at the same time, and a million other et ceteras. So the best advice I think is to be consistent, be communicative, but not burdensome, and package stuff is clean, neat, and ready to use as humanly possible. So ordering from you is simple, dependable, and straightforward. And work to get standing orders. That makes everything easier on everybody. If they just know you're coming with 10 pounds of whatever next week and you arrive with 10 pounds of whatever next week, everybody will appreciate that. Lastly, always charge enough to keep yourself in business. Feel like that's not the worst idea. Feel free, commenters, to add to that. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will talk about what it's like to transition from cook to farmer. Be right back.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
So I saw this question recently from one of our old videos from @KA and some letters and numbers. Quote, "Hello, I'm a cook from New York City looking to transition to becoming a farmer. How did you transition the cooking life into a farmer?" End quote. Now, I have touched on this subject a little bit before and how I went from cooking to farming, but maybe not specifically how the two worlds differ. To back up, inspired by years of working in kitchens and then reading Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, which in retrospect was a weird source of inspiration, but I was 19 years old. So anyway, I decided I wanted to be a chef. So I did that for several years, and as I've discussed, I transitioned to a career in wine sales for a few years. Then, to really wrap this into a neat, quick package, I then decided to be a farmer. And without question, my culinary background felt significantly more useful on the farm than my wine sales background, but in some very specific ways. For one, farming is physically harder than cooking, but cooking is generally much more mentally and emotionally difficult than farming. Cooking is often, setting your body to task for an hour and a half on one specific thing, maybe doing a few things at once, and then moving on to a new project after the bin of onions are cut or whatever. In farming, the projects often just stretch on for hours or days. You are doing multiple things at one time, but the timeline isn't, I've got to get these potatoes in the oven for the next 40 minutes. It's, I've got to get these potatoes in the ground for the next 80 plus days. So you are doing many, many things while those are cooking. The timeline took me some getting used to because the projects were just so long on a farm. So although the work is varied like it is in a kitchen, each project is much more robust. In that way, at first, it can be a little taxing mentally and physically just to do one thing for many, many hours or days, then wait many days, weeks or months on the finished product. On that physical note, farming is significantly heavier, hotter, colder, and harder on the body, but at least it's not as hard on the neck and often the back as cooking is. Standing over a table all day chopping, onions or whatever it may be is brutal, and I can't really do it anymore myself. It's really hard on my body. I need to use my muscles more than that in a day, be able to work from my knees and then do it standing up and then do it straddling something. Like, it's just so much easier to have all these different ways to do one thing In cooking, you don't really get that so much. It's just kind of, you got to look down and cut. In farming, there's still pressure to finish something and a need for an economy of motion. So skills around those translate well, but the pressure is also stretched out on the timeline. Like, you will know for weeks that X crop failed and have to learn to just kind of sit with that feeling and react to it. But in farming, it's hard to refire something like you can in a kitchen when it goes wrong. So especially as a business owner, you feel, just the weight of each mistake for a bit longer in farming. Like days, weeks, or even months longer. In both, you have to be efficient and clean. You have to care about the quality of the end product and the way it looks. Cooks often make some of the best farmers for those reasons. It's not as intense on a day-to-day basis. Farming's not. So also, I think there will be cooks who miss that little bit of intensity, but maybe get a little bit of that back when selling at the farmer's market on busy days. So anyway, if you are a cook looking to transition, I think you'll transition well, but also you will have never tasted better produce than the crops you grow yourself and then harvest yourself. It will blow your mind. All right, I think that's it for this Friday and this week. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. He had a massive job today, so shouts to that. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, where you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Kyle Richardville, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, Chris Yates, Ian at Grindstone Farms, and Russell Hedgedorm. I think the last is not an M, it's an N. Anyway, thanks, Russell. All right, so our hero, Raj, rolls up to the office for the procedure to regrow his legs. But as he learns pretty quickly, it's less of a procedure and more of a, like an inoculation of sorts that is required to, grow the legs back. The doctor places 2 small tubes on each of his legs, and, well, that's basically it. In about a month, the legs will be grown, the doctor says, and then, those bands that he put on will fall off. Once they're ready, the legs, we will start the rehabilitation. There will be some mild discomfort there, he tells Raj, but mostly just like an itchiness. So Raj wheels himself out of the door and home. That weekend, the legs begin to grow. He can see them like 2 little greenish nubs of flesh slowly expanding like a souffle. The discomfort is more than just mild, but it's mostly tolerable. However, one morning he wakes up and his legs have grown feeder roots. The roots have reached out of the window and are sunk into the ground outside. They have effectively rooted. He can't move, or at least not, more than a few feet. He slowly tries to cut one, and the pain is immense. He grabs his cell phone and tries to call the doctor, but the number is out of service. He can't get a hold of him. And just like that, Raj awakens from his dream, sweating, terrified. Then he scoots over to his chair, smiles, and looks forward to another long, fun day of dance classes. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you Monday. Bye.